Today I'm gonna be reading "Escape from the Western Diet" by Michael Pollan. The undertow of nutritionism is powerful. Much nutrition science qualifies as reductionist science, focusing as it does on individual nutrients, such as certain fats or carbohydrates, rather than on whole foods and dietary patterns. By using this sort of science to try to figure out what's wrong with the Western diet is probably unavoidable, however imperfect. It's the sharpest experimental and explanatory tool we have. It also satisfies our hunger for a simple one nutrition explanation. Yet it's one thing to entertain such explanations, and quite another to mistake them for the whole truth or not let any of them dictate the way you eat. And many of the scientific theories put forward to account for exactly what in the Western diet is responsible for Western diseases conflict with one another. The lipid hypothesis be reconciled with carbohydrate hypothesis and theory that a deficiency of omega-3 fatty acids is chiefly to blame for chronic illness is at odds with the theory that refined carbohydrates are the key. So far in this article, the author, Michael Pollan, is speaking about the consequence of the Western diet, speaking that it can cause chronic illness, and also it's responsible for Western diseases. Now, when I think of like a Western, maybe the chronic illnesses, maybe things that require like weight, stuff like that, maybe food illnesses, sort of. Okay, let's continue. And while everyone can agree with the food of refined carbohydrates has pushed important micronutrients out of the modern diet, the scientists who blame our health problems on deficiencies of these micronutrients are not the same scientists who see a sugar-soaked diet leading to metabolic syndrome, and there to enlist no less the rest of us gravitate toward a single, all-encompassing explanation. So here he's looking at seeing how the two types of scientists disagree with one another. As you can see here, he explains how some scientists see a sugar-soaked diet, and others see the micronutrients. Okay, let's continue. And from there to heart diseases and cancer, it is only natural for scientists, no less than the rest of us, to gravitate toward a single, all-encompassing explanation. That is probably why you now find some frenetic critics of the lipid hypothesis embracing the carbohydrate hypothesis with the same absolute zeal that once condemned in the Fat Boys. In course of my own research into these theories, I have been specifically warned by scientists allied with the carbohydrate camp not to fall under the spell of the omega-3 cult. There is a lot more religion in science than you might expect. So here we find ourselves lost at sea amid the cross currents of conflicting science, or do we? Because it turns out we don't need to declare our allegiance to any one of these schools of thought in order to figure out how best to eat. In the end, there are theories, scientific explanations for an empirical phenomenon that is not itself in doubt. People eating a Western diet are prone to complex of chronic diseases that seldom strike people eating more traditional diets. Scientists can argue all they want about biological mechanisms behind the phenomenon, but whichever is the solution to the problem would appear to remain very much the same: stop eating a Western diet. So these first few paragraphs that I'm seeing so far is that he's explaining how he doesn't agree with the Western diet, that he sees it linking to Western diseases. So, seeing how I think it's more about the processed food that can cause all this stuff, because nowadays all the food we eat is heavily processed. In truth, the chef value of any and all theories of nutritional apart from satisfying our curiosity about how things work is not to the eater so much as to the food industry and the medical community. The food industry needs theories so it can better redesign specific processed foods. A new theory means a new line of products, allowing the industry to go on tweaking the Western diet instead of making it more radical change to its business model. For the industry, it's obviously preferable to have a scientific rationale for further processing foods, whether by lowering the fat or carbs, or by boosting omega-3s or fortifying them with antioxidants and probiotics. Then entertain seriously proposition that processed foods of any kind are a big problem. Again, he goes back to actually state the problem, not just use facts. He explains here that processed foods are the big part of the problem. Almost all food that we eat today is processed heavily. Okay, back to it. For the medical community, to scientific theories about diet nourish business as usual. The new theories budget a new drugs to treat diabetes, high blood pressure, and cholesterol. New treatments and procedures to ameliorate chronic diseases, and new diets organized around each new theory's elevation of one class of nutrient and demotion of another. Much lip service is paid to importance of prevention by the healthcare industry, being an industry stands to profit more handsomely from new drugs procedures to treat chronic diseases than it does from a wholesale change in the way people eat. Cynical, perhaps you can argue, the medical community's willingness to treat the broad contours of the Western diet as a given is a reflection of realism rather than its greed. People don't want to go there, as Walter Willett responded to critic who asked him why nurses' health study doesn't study benefits of more alternative diets. Still, medicalizing the whole problem of the Western diet instead of working to overturn it, whether at the level of the patient or politics, is exactly what you'd expect from a healthcare community that is sympathetic to nutriism as a matter of temperament, philosophy, and economics. You would not expect such a medical community to be sensitive to cultural or ecological dimensions of food problem, and it isn't. Well, now that has changed. When doctors kicked the fast food franchises out of the hospital, so what more ecological or more cultural approach to the food problem counsels us? How might we plot our escape from nutriism, and in turn from the most harmful effects of the Western diet? To Dennis Burkitt, the English doctor stationed in Africa during World War II who gave the Western diseases their name, the answer seemed straightforward, if daunting. The only way we're going to reduce disease, he said, is to go backwards to the diet and lifestyle of our ancestors. This sounds uncomfortably like approach of the diabetic aborigines who went back to the bush to heal themselves, but I don't think that this is what Burkitt had in mind, even if it was not a very attractive or practical strategy. For most of us know the challenge we face today, figuring out how to escape the worst elements of the Western diet, the lifestyle without going back to the bush. In theory, nothing could be simpler. To escape the Western diet and the ideology of nutriism, we have to stop eating and thinking that way. But this is harder to do in practice. Given the treacherous food environment, we now inhabit the loss of cultural tools to guide us through it. Take the question of the whole versus processed food. Or simply one simpler question: distractions between modern industrial foods and other kinds. Generally, screeners who condemn the term nutritionism suggests that the most important fact about any food is not its nutrient content, but its degree of processing. He writes, whole foods and industrial foods are two food groups I consider including in my useful food pyramid. Now, in these few paragraphs that I've read, I can see that the author Michael Pollan is very against processed foods and the Western diet, seeing as it causes other diseases. He sees it links to other diseases, but also he believes that we should change our diet away from those types of diets, away from processed food. Okay, thank you for watching.